So let's talk about installing Kubernetes cluster. Like I mentioned in our previous lesson, for high availability, you should have at least 2 master nodes and 2 worker nodes. So to install Kubernetes, we can have an architecture like this. To build a Kubernetes cluster such as this, it means that we need at least 5 VMs or 5 physical servers. We will also use the kubeadm to build a Kubernetes cluster like this. If you also wish, you can leverage on the cloud infrastructure as a service platform or the Kubernetes managed services on the cloud. And trust me, building this kind of Kubernetes cluster is very easy as compared to building the OpenShift cluster. Well, that's that for me. You might not find it that way to you guys. However, because I don't have all these resources in my lab is very full. I have a lot of servers, a lot of VMs running on my lab. So I don't have the resources to create 5 virtual machines, and I don't even have 5 physical servers either. Hence, we're going to make use of Minikube. So what is Minikube? Minikube allows you to have a Kubernetes cluster that is both the master and the worker nodes in just one node or one server. This is also called a single node Kubernetes cluster. Minikube is very good for an environment as this. It's good for a test environment or for a learning environment. If you also have a limited resources like I do, Minikube is also good for such people as well. Whatever installation you have in Minikube, whatever commands you run in a Minikube cluster is also the same commands that you're going to be running in a production-like installation environment. So having Minikube or using Minikube to learn or for test environment is as good as also running those commands on a production-like environment. At the end of this course, I'm going to show you how to install a Minikube cluster in a production-like environment where we're going to have at least 2 master nodes and at least 3 worker nodes. But for now, we're going to make do of the Minikube. So let's install Minikube. Minikube can be installed on several platforms. Minikube can be installed on a Windows, Mac, or Linux operating system. But there are a few things you should know about Minikube. And one of them is that to install Minikube, you must use a platform that supports virtualization. Minikube Kubernetes cluster can only work on an hypervisor. So that means that if you're going to be using Minikube on your system, you must install either KVM or VirtualBox or whatsoever hypervisor that you wish to install. But the basic thing is that Minikube only works on an hypervisor. So in this class, we're going to be installing Minikube on a Red Hat Enterprise Linux. I'll also show you how to install Minikube on Ubuntu at the end of this course. But because I am way familiar with Red Hat, I'm a Red Hat guy, so I would just love to use Kubernetes on Red Hat Enterprise Linux. And this process of installation can be done both on Red Hat 8 and Red Hat 9 system. So what we're going to do first is to make sure that we have the KVM hypervisor installed on our Red Hat system, after which we also install Minikube. And the good thing about Minikube is that it also comes with the Docker container runtime. So if you wish, you can install Docker on your system, and if you do not wish, you don't need to install Docker because Minikube comes with the Docker container runtime. And like I mentioned in the previous lesson, that to interact with Kubernetes, you will have to go through the API server, and you need to use some tools to be able to interact with the API server. Tools such as the kubectl, the GUI, and some other tools. So for this, our Minikube installation, we are going to be installing Kubectl. The Kubectl client will enable us to be able to interact with the Kubernetes cluster. So without wasting much time, let's see the step-by-step guide of how to install Minikube cluster on Minikube Kubernetes cluster on Red Hat Enterprise system. So because this is a RHEL 8 server, that means that I would automatically use the KVM hypervisor as my hypervisor to run Minikube. Like I said, you can use some other type of hypervisor. If you want to use VirtualBox or whatsoever hypervisor you wish to use, you can use it. But I have decided to use the KVM hypervisor. And also because this is a Red Hat system with full installation, I didn't do minimal installation, so I just did full installation. That means that automatically I should have KVM installed, and that also means that normally even KVM should be running on my system automatically. But I can check if that is true or not. So to see if KVM is running on my system, I can just use the command systemctl status live-rat. So I can see that there is live-rat daemon, but it's not running on my system. But for now, it does not bother me if it runs or it doesn't run for now, because I need to make some configurations. I need to do some configurations before I can bring up this KVM hypervisor. So to start with, I'm going to even check if my system can support virtualization extension. So to do that, I can just use the command lscpu, which is list CPU. I'm going to grep for virtualization. So you can see that my system can support virtualization, and I tell you this is a more or less like a nested virtualization because this VM was provisioned on a VMware Workstation hypervisor. So I'm more or less doing like a nested virtualization. So let me quickly show you what I did while installing this VM, while creating this VM. I made sure that I have the virtualization engine enabled. You can see that this here is being ticked, which means that virtualize this VM. So that was what I did to be able to enable this nested virtualization on this environment. And you can also see that I have the memory size of 4 gig and I have the hard disk size rather of 45 gig. And so this is just what I did. So I also need to check if the KVM modules are loaded. So I can just list modules and I can also grep for KVM. So you can see that the KVM modules are loaded. And the next thing I need to do is to install other KVM virtualization packages or tools on my system. So I want to do this first before I start the live-rat daemon. So to do that, I can just do dnf install @vrat and I can say yes to all. So while this is installing, what I did first is to update the system. By the time I created this VM, I just did dnf install to update the system to its latest. So after that, you can then install the other KVM virtualization packages or tools. So while this is installing, I'm going to pause the video, and when it's done, I'm going to resume the video. So this is done installing. What I'm going to do now is to start the live-rat daemon. So I can do systemctl start live-rat. Oops. And if you want to restart the system, if yours is already started, so all you need to do is just say restart live-rat. So if I check the status of live-rat, you can see that the hypervisor is active, it is running, and it is loaded. Because we don't because we don't want the system to automatically choose Podman or start Minikube with it, we also need to install the KVM driver for Docker. So to do that, we're going to download the driver. So this command here is going to download the driver. I'm going to be posting this the link to this website, the link to where you can easily copy and paste commands. So I'm going to be posting that in the description box below. So here I'm just going to make sure that I download the KVM driver for Docker. Now that this is downloaded, I can verify that. So you can see the driver here. And what I need to do to install this is to make it executable. So I can just do chmod +x, that is, make this executable. And now that it is executable, of course, if I try to confirm, you can see that it is executable. So now I can install the driver and I can just easily put it in the user local bin directory, since it is a binary file and it can be moved into my path. Alright, so it's going to be easier that way for me. And like I said, I'll also drop the link to how you can do all of this in the description box below. So I'm just going to move Docker, the Docker driver to USR local bin. So now I can verify the version of this driver. So I have it to be version 1.25.2. So the next thing I'm going to do is to install kubectl. Like I said, we need kubectl to be able to interact with Kubernetes. So this also is going to install the kubectl from this Google website. Now that this is installed, I can make this file executable as well. So I'm going to do chmod kubectl. If I confirm that, excuse me, you see that the kubectl file, the kubectl has been made, the binary file has been made executable. So now we can easily install this by moving it to the path. Alright, so let's verify the kubectl version as well. Version. So you can see the kubectl version to be 1.24.2. That's the version. Now that we have our KVM, that's our hypervisor, and the kubectl installed, the next thing we need to do is to download and install Minikube. And like I said, Minikube always comes with the Docker container runtime pre-configured. So this command is going to download Minikube. So let's verify if Minikube has been downloaded. So you can see that it's been downloaded, and just the way we used to do, we're just going to make the file executable. So that's going to be chmod x Minikube, and then we're going to put it in the path. So I'm going to move Minikube to the user local bin directory. Alright, so I cannot verify the version of the Minikube that we've installed. So I can do Minikube version. So we have version 1.25.2. Now that we have Minikube installed, we're now going to run Minikube in the KVM hypervisor. But there's an issue here because the KVM driver in this setup can't be used as the root user. So we need to run Minikube with the KVM hypervisor with another user, which is a non-root user. So in this case, I have a container user on this system. So we're going to need to add the container user to the LibVirt group, which is the hypervisor group on this system. And we're also going to need to add the container user to the sudoers group. So what I'm going to do is, excuse me, so I'm going to do user mode. I'm going to append this user to the LibVirt group, and the user is container user, so I just make it a shortened form as cont. So if I do id cont, you can see that this user is in the LibVirt group. We're also going to make this user a sudo user, so I'm just going to add it to the RHEL group as well. So if I do id cont, you can see that this has also been added to the RHEL group. So we need to switch user to the container user for us to be able to run Minikube. Alright, so if I do Minikube, you would see the different options of Minikube. And to start Minikube, we need to use the command Minikube start, which means that this is going to start a local Kubernetes cluster. So by the time we run the command Minikube start, it will automatically download the VM image for Kubernetes, and it will also automatically configure the single node Kubernetes cluster. So we're going to configure Kubernetes. I'm going to say Minikube start. Then I'm going to make sure that the Minikube starts with the KVM hypervisor. So I'm going to say driver equals KVM2. So you can see that Minikube is trying to configure Kubernetes cluster. So it's using the KVM2 driver on the configuration, and you can see that Minikube is starting on Red Hat Enterprise Linux 8.6, and it has started downloading the VM boot image. So this is going to take a while depending on the speed of your internet. So what I'm going to do is to pause this video, and when this download is complete, we're going to resume the video. So there's an issue here. Minikube can't start. So it threw an error which says please run blah blah blah. So I tried starting again, and then it's still throwing an error which is exiting you to drvcp endpoint. So it's giving suggestions. I wouldn't know why this is throwing an error, because I've done this installation several times with KVM2. But if we try to do this and it's still throwing an error, we might need to use the Docker driver to start Minikube. So I'm just going to do this. I'm going to delete the cluster again, and I'm going to try to start the cluster again. This is the first time I'll be experiencing this, but it's part of it, so it's not an issue. So we're going to try and start Minikube again. And before I do that, this time around, I will try and make sure that I set the default driver to be KVM2. So I'll just do this. Minikube, we're going to use sudo command this time around. Minikube config set VM driver KVM2. Oops, so I'm going to exit out of here, and I'm going to say Minikube config set VM driver KVM2. So I'm going to switch user back to the container user. I'm going to try to start Minikube again. So I'm just going to say Minikube start this time around. So you might not run into this issue, like I said. This is the first time of facing this issue. So for me, I'm just going to try and fix it. I mean, it's part of learning. But if you did yours and yours was successfully started, then that's good for you. So I'm going to wait. When this is done again, I'm going to resume the video. Alright, so this is done, and you can see that this has been successfully created. You can see that kubectl is now configured to use Minikube cluster, and our default namespace is default. So as we go on in this course, we will understand what namespace is. So to be very sure that Minikube has started successfully, we can run some commands. So I can say Minikube status. So you can see that Minikube is running, and it is a control plane type. It is running, kubelet is running, API server is running, and kubeconfig is configured. So to also get the cluster information, I can say kubectl cluster info. So this will give me the cluster information as well. You can see that the control plane is running at this address, and the core DNS2 is also running at this address. And for me to also see the client version for kubectl and the Kubernetes version, I can do kubectl version. I can put out the output in YAML format. So you can see that I have the client version to be this version, and I have the server version to be this version. So this shows that we have the Minikube well configured. And the last command we're going to run to test our installation is to run kubectl get nodes. So you can see that we have the Minikube here, which is ready, and the role is control plane master. Of course, it has to be, because it will be the one to control all the Kubernetes activities, all the clustering operations on the system. So this is working, of course, like I said, it's working as both the worker node and the master node. So it's just a single node cluster for Kubernetes. So I hope you've been able to do some sort of troubleshooting in creating a Minikube cluster. Yeah, I was happy that we got that error and were able to troubleshoot and find ourselves out of it. As we go on in this course, if we encounter more error, I'll make sure that I leave it. I won't do the editing, so that you can be able to understand and know how to troubleshoot whenever you find yourself in such scenarios. So thank you for watching, and in the next lesson we're going to look at how to create Kubernetes object or component.